Mr. Jefferson.
Yes.
There are several people here who wish an audience, sir. Are you available?
I am indeed. Good day, friends. Good day, citizens of these new United States of America. Good day, friends from the Republic and friends from this Commonwealth of Virginia, wherein I now sit in this great cosmopolitan and fair city of Williamsburg, the city in which I have lived for the past 20 years of my life. Coming here in the winter of 59 and 60, Mr. Jefferson made his way to this city to attend a college, the old Royal College of King William and his wife Mary. I attended that institution. I must say I attended that institution for 2 years. I received no degree and then moved back in with my mother, which I hear is now an American tradition. You're welcome for starting that one, and those of you living under that circumstance, I assure you there is still the flicker of candle before you. There is still that candle burning in the darkness. Press ever on, friends. If you find yourself in that situation, who knows? You might even become president someday. I wish to take questions from you, but before I do, I have certain understanding that you have some questions upon this nation, upon this Commonwealth, upon we, these citizens of these new United States, about what is it that it means to be a citizen? What is it that is the state of this Commonwealth? What is it that is the state of this Union? Equally, you might have questions upon my circumstance, my upbringing, my domestic life. You might have questions upon me as governor of this Commonwealth of Virginia. Equally, I would be very happy, I assure you, to entertain questions upon archaeology, architecture, language, music, that is natural philosophies, science, botany, zoology, chemistry, astronomy, anatomy. It matters not to me, friends, whether it be government theory, philosophy, or philosophers. There is not a blade of grass that grows uninteresting to me. Now, that being said, I apologize. I apologize for my lack of skill at extemporaneous speech. It has been said of me that I cannot string 3 sentences together, that I have a bit of a stutter, to which I say, true. These jokes are mostly for myself. Nonetheless, friends, if you have not heard the news, there is greatness upon us, and that is victory at Yorktown. Equally, there is darkness upon my person. I have left the high executive office of governorship of this great Commonwealth under unhappy circumstances. I have been put on trial by my friends, by my peers, and now I find myself the happiest station that man can find, that is a citizen, just as you, a citizen under this republic. And now we stand united, e pluribus unum, coming out of this crystalline structure of government, out of many structures, many creeds, many colors, many varieties of mankind put through the crystal structure of government and then pushed out of the other end through this government as one, united. That is where we find ourselves. The hope is that we might remain united, friends. Though there will be division amongst our number, though, yes, indeed, there will be a divisive nature amongst mankind that wishes to tear this nation asunder, and even, rest assured, there are men still living on this continent who wish to see monarchy spread, who wish to see monarchy in our new government. These are the very same men who lived under the tyranny of monarchy and yet wish to see that tyrannical seed spread upon this country. Disallow them. Assure them in the unity and beautiful nature of mankind, multitudinous in its nature, that might be this new government. That the most beautiful and most surest form of government is spread in the hands of the people, of you, of we, the people. That this government, tumultuous in its nature, is the best government man has yet created. Now, that being said, I wish to turn the conversation properly over to you. In proper parliamentary procedure, I have presented a motion, that motion being seconded, thank you for your vote, and then voted upon, thank you for your vote again, and then shall we say it is in the affirmative, in the majority. Congratulations, you majority, you now have the run of the room. This conversation is now yours, and I am yours no longer as governor of this Commonwealth of Virginia in this year of 1781, but rather sit with you, shoulder to shoulder, united. I have my woman here, Mrs. Pittman, and she has been delightful in her acquiescence towards relaying me your questions, your curiosities. There is nothing that is taboo under the sun. Bring them to me, friends, and we shall, through the mutual conversation of delight, delve ever deeper into the collective well of human knowledge. Mrs. Pittman, are there curiosities already perambulating through the sphere?
Yes, Mr. Jefferson. In fact, the first one is you, I believe, mentioned you were put on trial recently. Somebody is wondering if you could perhaps say more on that.
You wish me to delve into my own darkness of being put on trial?
Well, in fact, Elizabeth asks, isn't it true that you fled Richmond and left your wife and children there?
Well, Elizabeth, I apologize for these rumors that have been spread about this state. I apologize. Old habits, you know. I grew up a loyalist. I grew up a subject. And now we find ourselves with these old habits being dashed away upon the rocks of newness. I did not leave my family behind. As I recall, I was standing on my little mountain on June 3rd of this year of 1781 when we were overrun. We were overrun by the British, who have since, of course, overrun Virginia since their victory at Yorktown. You know, when I was governor my first term, I have since served 2 terms. When I was governor my first term, Washington, I believe, wrote to me and inquired as to whether the Virginia line of men might be better served, serving with the Continental line. I saw great logos in his argument, and so sent the Virginia line away. Would that I had known then what I know now. Our Virginia line being sent away, well, then left Virginia unguarded. And wouldn't you know, when Virginia was unguarded, Virginia was invaded under my term as your governor. We have it to understand that their object, one, was to, and I quote, disrupt government. Our capital has since been removed from Williamsburg, this fair city, to Richmond town. And their object being to disrupt government, their object was Richmond town, where we had removed our state government. Those troops then occupying Richmond town, I recalled government to my home, to Charlottesville, wherein those very same troops continued pursuing, harassing, haranguing us. My home was overrun. You know, when I recalled government to my home at Charlottesville, my home Monticello, on, as I recall, June 28th, do you know how many delegates showed up on June 28th? Aside from me as the governor, of course. 1. 1 man showed up when our government was recalled. Finally, on June 3rd, June 2nd, we had a quorum. Now, my term was to be ended on June 2nd. My term as governor. I had made it known to the men who were present finally at that quorum at my home, Monticello, my home at Charlottesville. I made it known that I was not to stand a 3rd term, which is allowable by our Virginia Constitution. You can't stand 3 consecutive 1-year terms before you are so disallowed by our term limits, as Mr. Henry was. I had made it known that I was not to seek a 3rd term. But it was a Friday, and I know not how your men of state stand, but our statesmen, our politicians, commonly do not wish to work on the weekend, and so they push the thing until June 4th. And wouldn't you know, on June 4th, my home was invaded. There came a man riding up the mountain, Jack Jewett Jr. He rode 40 miles in one night to warn us that they were coming, that we must separate. I was standing in the garden. I have a 1,000-foot-long garden there at Monticello. I wanted a 2,000-foot-long garden, but my wife says that there must be an end to things, so there's a compromise for you. I was standing there tending to my kale, and Jack Jewett Jr. came up, riding up with scratches upon his face, scars that he still carries to this day, and warned us that the British were coming. I roused the delegates that were there, offered them breakfast. I am a Virginian. Some wine. I am a Virginian. And then issued them forth. And then I sent my family away, down the south side of the mountain to a neighboring plantation for their own safety. So did I leave them behind? Absolutely not. I was the last man remaining, aside from my people. There at the hill, my little mountain, Monticello, when they finally came riding up, I watched my fields burn, my livestock slaughtered, what they did not carry off. But my family was away, first and foremost, before me. I thank you, Elizabeth, for your question. I hope that we can squash these rumors that ride like fire upon tinder of our minds. Let me tell you, that is the God's honest truth of the matter.
Abba, speaking of wine, Mr. Jefferson, they ask, can you tell us some of your favorite wine types? Do you prefer red, white, or sparkling?
You wish to know about wine? What a delightful topic upon these dark ages, a light that is before us. I always keep hope, at the stern, at the bow of the ship, and fear at the stern. And I assure you that you cannot keep hope at the bow without a nice glass of Madeira. That is the wine of my choice, the wine of my youth. Madeira, of course, taking its title from the island upon which that wine is grown, the island of Madeira, very creatively named, off of the coast of Portugal. I greatly enjoy Madeira and spend a great amount of my monies upon Madeira. My palate has not yet expanded, you understand, expanded to the great wines that might be found upon the vaunted scenes of Europe. These Albariños, these Margots, and Bordeauxs. We shall have to wait a few years. But for now, my heart, as it is in Virginia, my palate is upon Madeira. I recommend it. Stock your stores, friends. Madeira.
Speaking of wine and other hobbies, Carla has asked, other than reading, what is your favorite hobby?
My favorite hobby other than reading? Well, I'm never a day off my horse. I say as much. I find horseback riding the most agreeable form of exercise. My horses I spend a great deal of money upon. They are not pets to me. They are my friends. And as such, I treat them. My friends, I ride, as I said, every single day. In fact, I have spent a great deal of money upon the Fear Not line here in Virginia. The Fear Not line is a series of thoroughbreds upon which, if you have access, you might find, expending a bit of coin, access to those. My newest and most agreeable horse, his name is Caractacus. Caractacus is my greatest horse upon this moment, and I ride him every day. I should equally say that I always carry my musket, or at least my brace of pistols, with me. I say that I never miss a bird from less than 30 yards with my Turkish pistols. So perhaps horseback riding, and then a close second is shooting at the fowl upon this country with my pistols.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Several people have inquired after your health, including Holly, who asks, considering the health issues facing us right now, was there ever a time in your life where something similar occurred? And if so, how was that handled?
Well, my health is quite fine. If you mean my physical health, my internal landscape has been somewhat dashed as of recently by this trial put on by my friends. But nonetheless, inoculation, I suspect, is what you're speaking of. Rest assured, friends, there is nothing to be feared from inoculation. This sickness that has grown among mankind for many, many centuries might be, by the sciences of mankind and man's understanding upon this world, cured. Man might become immune, just as man does through knowledge of being immune to the mistakes made generations prior, so might man become immune to the illnesses and sicknesses. I was inoculated in Philadelphia, as I recall. I had just passed the bar. I had just become an attorney, and I went to Philadelphia, where I was inoculated, laid up for several weeks. You understand, inoculation does take some time for your person to become accustomed to. My inoculation, being in Philadelphia, stayed there for several weeks, and then myself becoming cured of that disease, now I have continued my inoculation practices to my family, and of course to my people. My people, that is, my slaves, those who situate themselves around me. There is nothing to be feared from truth, from honest, reasoned truth, fact, and science. And science has proved that inoculation to be the best move forward towards mankind, creating a better security for their own persons and society. Have I answered the question? I hope so.
I think you have. Charlotte, who is 10 years old, wants to ask, what were your biggest challenges when writing the Declaration of Independence?
The Declaration of Independence and challenges therein, well, first and foremost, I should say that it's not easy to become a traitor. It's not easy to decide that the country under which you lived is no longer a country under which you wish to live. To look at your government and say, not only can we do better, not only should we do better, but I will take it under my own arms, my own person, to take up arms against my own country, to even shed blood. You know, in 1776, when I had the unhappy circumstance to author that document, you realize I was tearing down the entire government under which I lived my entire life, under which my parents lived their entire lives, my grandparents and their parents before them. It's not an easy or light decision, which is why I make statement in that same declaration that governments should not be changed for light and transient causes. But when you exist under a government that has so long enforced tyranny over you and has for so long removed rights from you, then mankind has no choice but to either alter the systems of government under which we live or to abolish it and create a new system of government. That's the unhappy circumstance that we found ourselves in 76. But let me point you to this. The radical nature of 76 isn't that we declared independence. The radical and audacious nature of 76 isn't that even that we took the crown off of one man's head. The radical nature of 17 and 76 is that after taking the crown off of one man's head, we then turned right around and placed that crown upon all men. We had all of us existed under a government wherein one man wore a crown, one, by divine right, by blood right, and we were now instituting a new system that truly allowed all men to have access to natural rights of government. My document was mine. I wrote it solely. I wrote several drafts, which you may read if you have access to Dr. Google. Equally, that draft was sent to my committee of 5 men, Dr. Franklin, Sherman, Livingston, Adams, myself, of course. They made minor alterations. I said we hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable. Dr. Franklin, I believe it was, who suggested self-evident. I don't know, I suppose it will stick. Then we submitted out of our committee of 5 men to the committee of a whole. That document was presented on June 28th of 76. They chose to table the issue and then take a vote. For we cannot adopt a document of independence if we have not first voted for independence. So the vote was to be had, and the vote was. And let's not forget, as to your point, the first vote for independence was split. 7-6, 7 for, 6 against. We were divided even in the summer of 1776. The vote finally for independence was taken on July the 2nd, which is our nation's birthday, our nation's natal day, as John Adams said, should be remembered ad infinitum with parade and firework. So I hope that you, every single year, celebrate July the 2nd as our nation's birthday. After we voted for independence, then, finally, after 2 days of battering back and forth, Congress emasculated my document and it became theirs. It became ours, our nation's document, this Declaration of Independence, in which included an anti-slavery clause, was taken out. This anti-slavery clause being taken out by South Carolina and Georgia. Now this is our document. And that document was finally, of course, agreed upon, the ratified version, on July 4.
To go backwards a little bit, Mr. Jefferson, several people have asked about the beginning of your understanding of the law, in particular about your law professor, Mr. Wythe. In fact, Alice has asked, was Mr. Wythe a hard law professor? And someone else has asked why you did not finish your time at William and Mary.
Who was it that asked about my time with law?
Alice.
Alice? I thank you, Alice. I hope that you have some curiosity upon government theory, upon law, lex scripta, and codified government as it moves forward and always will through time. I hesitate to say that your curiosity should, remain nothing more than that, as there are no allowances for women to become attorneys. But there's nothing to bar you from, having a curiosity about the bar, but you will never pass, you understand. Mr. Wythe he's a resident of this city, of Williamsburg. He is my mentor, he is my friend. In fact, I say as much, he's my mentor in my youth and my friend throughout my entire life. Mr. Wythe is Virginia's preeminent attorney, and he took it upon me to find his answer in the affirmative. He did not need to take me on as a student. There's only 2 ways, truly, a man may become an attorney in my time. That's either you can leave this continent, you can go to an inn of court, INN of court. You can go to London if you wish to understand the language, or Edinburgh if you wish to not understand the language. Or you can take the exam here. You can study with a well-respected, well-established attorney. I chose Mr. Wythe, and Mr. Wythe chose me. And I studied under him for 3 years. Sometimes that study took place here in Williamsburg, and occasionally in the last year specifically, a great deal of that study took place at my home. He gave me a great deal of books to read, Blackstone, of course, Cook, of course, as well as philosophizers upon our time, ancient in their nature and more current in their creation, from Jean-Jacques Rousseau to Aristotle to Montesquieu to John Locke, of course. In his second treatise of government, John Locke says that all men are born free and equal. Those studies of those men and those philosophies took place here in Williamsburg under Mr. George Wythe, who was, strangely enough, a signer of that Declaration of America's independence. There is a great circle, a great progression of thought, wherein one generation passes the torch to the next, and that generation, catching from the one prior, passes it to the next, and the next, and the next, on from Aristotle to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, to Mr. George Wythe, to me, and now to you. You are now the bearers of this torch. Just as I studied under Wythe, so might you take our philosophies and bring them forth in your time. There is nothing different, Alice. Man has been doing the same thing so long as man can read, so long as man is educated. We might carry that torch, and we might, in this new republic, outlast the Romans. Wouldn't that be nice? I like that.
Mr. Jefferson, Jessica, as well as several other people, have asked about your wife and children.
Yes?
She has said that she's not learned much about your wife and children, and would you be willing to enlighten us about your personal life?
My personal life, as it pertains to my wife, is quite a domestic question, but I understand, Jessica, that me being a public figure might have my personal and domestic life exposed to the whim and understanding of the public. I married my wife in 1772. She was married prior to me, you know. Her first husband was Bathurst Skelton. He died quite suddenly there was a sudden instance that took his life and caused him to shed his mortal coil upon this earth. And she became a widow, and I was her father's attorney. When her husband died, I began calling on her father as his attorney a bit more frequently, just purely out of understanding from client to attorney, you understand. And well, wouldn't you know it, that in those conversations, a relationship began. As I recall, there was one moment when she was still in mourning. She was in her year of annus lectus, a year of mourning, and there came a moment when I was calling on her father for purely attorney privileges, and there was the light touch of a pianoforte wafting out the second story window, and my horse perked up its ears and trotted right over. I had no say in the matter, none. It was the wisest choice my horse ever made. I knocked upon the door and inquired as to whether the widow Skelton might be amenable to me accompanying her, me with my violin, my pochette violin, which is a small violin. It sits in the crook of your arm, just that big. Can you imagine a smaller device that holds all of the world's music? Anyway, we played the Flowers of Edinburgh, and then we wanted to marry in 71, but her child by her first marriage passed away, and so we chose to push the wedding off. We said we'd push it off until sometime in 72, and so on January 1 of 72, we married. We could not stay apart. We married at her father's plantation among a terrible snowstorm, and then we spent our honeymoon also at her father's plantation, which was a true delight, a true delight. I recommend that for anyone who is becoming married, to spend your entire honeymoon at your in-laws. It's a real pleasure. And then we had our first child the next year, Martha. You know, when my Martha discovered that she was with child, we had the question, which is, what do we name her? If it is a girl, what do we name her? If it is a boy? She said, if it is a boy, we should name her after your father, Peter Jefferson. And I said, that's fine and good, but what if it is a girl? And she said, we should name her after you, Martha. And she said, Virginia has too many Marthas. So I said, fine, we'll name her after my sister, Martha. And so the next year, Martha and I celebrated our first Christmastide at Monticello. Since I have had several children with my wife, Martha, childbirth is not easy upon her, and we lose a great number, but we are hoping to carry our progeny into the next generation. And someday we'll have more grandchildren than John Adams, hypothetically. Have I answered your question? Yes.
We are approaching the end of your availability, but we have so many questions coming in. I was wondering if you would be able to rapid fire answer some of our questions.
Yes, let us say 30 seconds each.
Yes, first question from Kimberly. Do you have pets, and do you like cats?
Do I have pets, Kimberly, and do I like cats? Well, there are some mousers at Monticello, and they do what mousers do. My pets, I have a deer park at Monticello, and if you come, Kimberly, you might, as is common to my custom, if I have you over, we can have a fine dinner, and then I'll put some corn in your hand, and you can reach it over the fence into my deer park and feed them out of your hand. Equally, and lastly, I have some mockingbirds that are my dear friends, and as you know, mockingbirds have a great fluency with notes and tones, and I have attempted, my favorite mockingbird is named Dick, and I have attempted to teach Dick how to speak Greek and Latin.
Ginny.
It's not gone well.
I can imagine. Jenny Lynn asks, what is your favorite flower?
My favorite flower, Jenny Lynn, Well, I like all flowers, but I suppose any flower, Jenny, Lynn, thank you, is the flower that produces the best fruit. I say that the best gift that may be introduced to any country is the introduction of a new plant. Now, I have encouraged many new plants to come in, including rice and peas and beans, kale even. So any flower, in my opinion, that produces the proper fruit, which may be produced with the greatest efficiency upon the sustenance of mankind, well, that is a flower worth producing, reproducing, and spreading about this entire new country. Thank you, Jenny Lynn.
Jory asks, what tavern is your favorite in Williamsburg?
What tavern is my favorite in Williamsburg? Any tavern that is open. Next question.
Kaylin wants to know if you love mac and cheese, like her cousin Kurt does.
Wants to know if I like mac and cheese?
Yes, macaroni and cheese.
Oh, macaroni. Oh,
yes.
Macaroni is a type of, I understand. I've never been to France. I've never been to another country, unless you count Massachusetts, and most men do. So I suspect that I might attend to the vaunted scenes of Europe at some point and might introduce to this country some type of macaroni, which is their terminology for a noodle. And a noodle being formed into this type might be produced upon it, some cheese, upon which might be placed, I recommend, into some mold, a mold gelatinous in its nature, and place it in your center so that you might discover with your friends, your patrons, and those sitting around you whether the thing is a solid or a liquid. It shakes, you know. So put your mac and cheese into a mold, gelatinous in its nature. That's what I recommend. What else?
Macy asks, how old were you when you became governor?
How old was I, Macy, when I became governor? Well, a gentleman never tells his age, and I would not dare tell mine upon this strange stage we find ourselves today. I will simply say this. I was born in the year 1743. 1743. April, in fact, of 1743, and I was elected governor in June of 1779. So I'll let you do the math, and, well, you need something to do while you're whiling away your hours at your home.
Barbara asks, what is your favorite Christmas tradition?
My favorite Christmas tradition is meeting with my family. Christmastide is I'm a man of state, and commonly that pulls me away from my home 8 months out of the year. And 8 months out of the year, I find myself away from my wife, away from my children, away from my beautiful home, that mountaintop retreat of Monticello. My favorite aspect of Christmas is that I have no state business to attend to but my family. I can truly spend at least 12 days of Christmastide with them, solely with them, and occasionally pull myself away from my wife and children to write a few letters. I cannot help but writing, and I cannot help but reading.
Ellie, age 6, and Ben, age 4, have asked, how long have you played the violin, and which music do you enjoy listening to?
Ellie and Ben upon the violin and music. I enjoy Corelli. I enjoy Abel. I enjoy Handel. If you know these names, these are great names that take their place upon my music stand at home. I began learning violin at a very young age. I was the fortunate son of a gentry family, which means a gentry family had some money. And I, being the eldest son of a gentry family, it's understood of me that I would receive a great amalgamation of education, included of which is horseback riding, dancing, of course, languages, music, and an understanding of ancient philosophies and grammar, etc. Music, I say, is the passion of my soul. I hope it will be the passion of yours going forward. I continue to play my violin. In fact, I played my violin in between writing drafts of the Declaration of America's Independence. My violin was my instrument of inspiration.
Several people have asked, Mr. Jefferson, do you know George Washington and his beautiful wife, Martha?
Do I know George Washington and his what?
Beautiful wife, Martha.
Is she? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Another Martha.
Another Martha?
Mm-hmm.
His wife, Martha?
Washington.
Ah, yes. I have met with Washington, of course. I was elected, of course, in the year 1769 here in Williamsburg. And Washington, already being a member of the House of Burgesses, we have served together since 1769. We served together at the Continental Congress, and I cannot say that I know his wife, Martha, but I have, of course, understood that he has been married, and I understand that she is a delightful, lovely woman of some perhaps polite conversation, and I hope and have no doubt that the four of us, that is my wife, Martha, George, and his wife, Martha, will have a lifelong communal friendship of happiness. There will never, ever be a moment of distinction between our two families. We shall ever remain united as we were in 1776 all the way through until the rest of our lives.
I have no doubt about it, Mr. Jefferson.
I'm certain.
We have one last question, and please don't feel like you have to be rapid on this. Bethany has asked, can you elaborate on why you believe history is perhaps one of the most important subjects to study?
Bethany, you have it. And that is that history, I say, is the most important subject that there is to study. There are multitudinous subjects which man might find great curiosity, great interest, and might improve mankind at large. We've equally spoken of philosophy and the sciences, specifically as it pertains to anatomy and mankind's inoculation. But the point of history is this. If you, Bethany, were to walk into a lending library and open up, perhaps you were in Philadelphia and you entered into Dr. Franklin's lending library, and you were to walk into the history section, and you were to open up a book of history, and you were to blow off the dust and open its creaky pages and read them, and you might say, my God, what ancient, tired, old mistakes. And then you would close that book and you would reshelve it in the correct position, Bethany. And then you would step out of that lending library into terra incognita, and you would learn from those mistakes. You would understand them so as to not repeat the same mistakes made generations prior. You would step out into terra incognita, and then you would make new mistakes. Man is imperfect. I say it this way, man cannot create a government that is better than mankind itself. It's impossible. The government that you create, Bethany, will be imperfect as the government that we created was imperfect. We are man, we are flawed. But the hope is that by studying history, we might understand the mistakes made generations prior and not repeat them in future generations. Now, here's the thing, Bethany. Someday your mistakes, should this republic last so long, your mistakes will be written about by the flicker of candle. There will be men who will look at your life and they will say, this was a mistake, and that was a mistake, and this might be exonerated. And someday your mistakes will be bound in leather tome volumes, and they will be bound in lending libraries, and someday your children and grandchildren might someday enter into those lending libraries and walk down the history section. And they will pick up a volume, and they will open it, its pages creaking, and they will say, my God, Bethany, what ancient, tired, old mistakes. You will be faulty, as our government is faulty. But the hope is, with an understanding of history, with an understanding of reading and writing, that our future generation might learn from these mistakes. If you see that your government is repeating the same mistakes made generations prior, this means one of two things. Either one, man is not reading history, or two, more dangerously, man is reading history and then choosing willfully to remain ignorant of the lessons contained therein. You might as well not even open up a book in the first place. History is a manual for mankind to be better. In our government, we allow for change over time, which means you will get the government you want, not the government we created. And if you wish the government you want, you must understand the mistakes made generations prior. This is my ardent drum that I shall beat for the rest of my life, and that is education. Education is the key to this entire experiment working. And if you achieve an education, if you can read, and you do read history, then we shall together outlast the Romans, Bethany. Shall we? I believe we can. Is that it?
I believe you have another appointment, sir.
I have another appointment?
Your wife needs you at home.
Oh, my wife always needs me. Very good. Well then, friends, allow me to say thank you for this delightful conversation, a mutual confab that we have delved ever deeper into the collective well of human knowledge. I hope that you shall join us again. In these strange times, we shall be, no doubt, meeting you here in the city of Williamsburg, but most importantly, here, right upon this face, this screen that you see before you, we shall meet you where the people are, and together we shall move ever forward. We shall bear this torch from one generation to the next. Friends, stay in touch, and if you would, perhaps if you have some, I know not, electronic form of communication, and I suspect that you do, as we are now communicating at this moment, might you subscribe to us? That way we can continue to communicate in every form that we might deem possible. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but the word subscribe keeps appearing in my mind. So please click the button, subscribe, send us your information, and we can continue to supply information of beautiful delight upon this fledgling country moving forward to your beautiful persons as now citizens of these new United States of America. Thank you, friends. Signing off, Thomas Jefferson.